Okay, a follow-up video due to some of the comments from some amateurs out there. Need to clear a few things up. So in my last video I clearly stipulated that I do not believe it was claimed by Matt or Dave that the motor itself was an over Unity device. There are some other junior members over there, probably lacking a fair bit of experience, that are saying that because the motor is returning power back to our power supply, it's an over Unity motor, and that's clearly not the case. So I hope I've made that clear, and I did state that in the last video that I don't believe the motor was intended to be the OU part of the system itself. It was part of a one part of a system as a whole that was designed to do a certain job. Apparently that job is to get a higher RPM, which we certainly do, from that of the stock standard motor, and enough torque to drive a generator, which we certainly have. I doubt very much that running the same amount of power through a standard motor, that this modified motor would be a much more powerful motor in the way of mechanical output. The standard motor would beat it hands down, unless someone would like to prove me wrong and put a standard motor running the same amount of power through it as a modified motor and show me the modified motor having more torque on the output. Very doubtful. And we know this because these motors get hot, and they get hot because of the way they are wound, and which is the reason this type of winding was abandoned over 50 years ago, and they went to the windings we now have today, much more efficient than the way the mat motor is wound. There are also some out there saying it's not a replication because it's not the exact same motor, and it doesn't have 4 magnets, it's only got 2, and it doesn't have 4 brushes, it's only got 2. Well, when I replicate something, I replicate it so as I get the same type of output from the device, and what the motor here is doing is exactly the same as what the mat motor is doing. So up here I took a screenshot of Luke's video, and that is the waveform of a genuine mat wound motor. Okay, so what I set out to do, because this is the only type of motor I have here, I have many of these motors and slightly bigger ones. They are all 2-pole motors, whereas Matt's a 4-pole motor. I acknowledged that in the last video, and but that doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a 4-pole motor to get exactly that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start this motor up and compare a genuine mat motor to this motor as far as what it is doing electrically, and that is what we want to achieve. We want the signal or the power in and out of the motor to be the same, and we want the motor to be able to perform work, which this one can because it has a fair bit of torque on the output. Alright, so now what I'm doing is I have 2 18 amp hour batteries there. They are being kept topped up with my power supply. You can see I have some very nice thick wires now going to our motor. So this is going to eliminate the power supply running amok. And that's another thing we'll cover while we're at it. Matt said that I didn't pay attention to the motor revving up when I disconnected my smoothing caps. And my answer is, well, of course the motor's going to rev up because the power supply is putting out more power. The inductive spikes, due to brush arcing and that, upset the power supply, as you've clearly seen, and the power supply ramped up the voltage, which in turn ramps up the power going to the motor, and that's what causes the motor to speed up. It's not the motor causing the motor to speed up, it's the motor causing the power supply to get all messed up. The power supply raised its voltage, as we've clearly seen, both on the power supply and the scope, and of course when you do this you're putting more power into the motor, so the motor goes faster. Nothing to do with the way the motor is wound, it has to do with my power supply. Alright, so let's connect this motor up and let's see what we can get in the way of waveforms. So this is what we're looking for, and what we'll do is get a nice clean shot there. Okay, so we can actually turn that off now. There we have a genuine matte wound motor, 4 poles, 4 brushes, and here we have my motor. So there you go. Yeah, to me that is what I call a damn near exact replication of the power in and out of the motor. It is exactly the same, and that is how I replicate things. Now I can go and spend some money and buy a 4-pole, 4-brushed motor, exactly the same as Matt uses, but I'm going to end up with exactly the same signal. So it makes no difference what motor you use, the difference is in how you wind it. And like I stated in the last video, I had to wind this a little different. It's basically the same, but I used 4 poles instead of 6 on the rotor, and that is because I only have 2 magnets and not 4, because the motor's a 2-pole and the other one's a 4-pole. You will see that mine is actually a little bit better. You will see on Luke's a little bit of fuzz there, inductive spikes, and where you'll see on mine I'm actually cleanly lifting the voltage above that of the supply. This is the voltage trace in Luke's video, and you can see no clear voltage bump, whereas the way I've wound it I get a very clear voltage rise that is greater than the supply when we get our reverse current feed back to our supply. So for those junior experimenters out of there that are saying that this is not a replication, well, you're going to have to eat your words, because it is damn near exact. So I hope that clears that up. And like I said, I'm not trying to disprove anything in regards to the motor itself, because there was nothing to disprove. I don't believe Matt or Dave claimed that the motor itself alone was the cause of the apparent over unity. This was just one part of the system that was designed to, it's basically a switch which turns the current on and off through the series system, and the reverse current, and in my case the higher voltage, in Luke's case some inductive noise, is due to the fact that the rotor windings right at this point here are passing between the two magnets, and that is where the magnetic field and the rotor going through that field, it's the greatest rate of change of the magnetic field in accordance to the coils passing through it. So that is why you get a reverse current and in my case a clear higher voltage across the supply batteries, because at that very point in time right here the motor is actually acting as a generator. So no rocket science there, very explainable, and it is able to obtain that higher voltage, which means it produces a current returning back to the source, because the coils on the rotor are passing through the points of the magnetic fields made by the magnets. That is where the coils see the greatest rate of change of the magnetic field. So I hope that clears that up, guys. As far as I'm concerned, that and that are the same. So this motor does indeed replicate exactly what the map motor does. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next video.